Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside the Issue, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Richfield. My name is Maureen Scalia and I'm the moderator for this program. Tonight we're going to take a journey down memory lane, going back quite far, I think, back to the 30s and 40s, when Richfield and some of the other suburbs around Minneapolis we're just beginning to get started in terms of a population. And my guest tonight on my immediate left is Jeanette Lofstrom, who actually grew up in Richfield. You were born in 1930 here in Richfield,
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Okay. And then my far left is W. Herbert Doty. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Correct.
But I'm probably going to call you Herb, if I may. And you also go back a while. You remember the 30s and 40s very well. And you were born in a small town, but then your parents moved to what is now Coon Rapids, correct, in the 20s?
Right.
Okay. Welcome to the show, and let's go down memory lane. I'll start with you, Jeanette. Let's say you're about 7, 8 years old, and you come out of the house on a summer day. What do you see?
Well, we had a big old house, but most of it was garage and barn, and just one end was 2 rooms, a kitchen and a living room, and then there were 2 rooms upstairs that were the bedrooms. And we had a big yard. We had an outhouse that was down about 100 feet from the house. And then we had a greenhouse, and my dad grew plants there. And out quite a little ways, we had to go out to the road. There was a stand, a vegetable stand, where we sold our vegetables that we grew, and then later on we sold plants. And that was Highway 100, and Highway 100 was a 3-lane busy highway. It carried all of the trucks that came around. Highway 100 circled the Twin Cities, so that it was really a busy highway there.
And that would be now kind of where
It's
494.
494. So in 1957, 494 took quite a bit of the farm and put in, the wide highway plus the service road. And so, and the farm was east of Portland Avenue, about between Oakland Park and Columbus. And then it went back from 78th Street up to 77th Street. It was on a slope there, quite a hill, facing south. So it was really good for growing strawberries and vegetables, whatever we decided to grow.
How did your dad get into this business?
Well, he was in World War I, and he started going to college before he went to the war, and then he was in the Navy Air Force, and he was a mechanic for airplanes. And then when he came back, he finished college, and he went to ag school at the University of Minnesota. And a lot of people wanted to be farmers, I guess, in those days, and he wanted to grow his own plants from seeds, and he got a partner, a guy named Hans, in about 1924 or so, and he started buying the land, and there was 12 acres there, but he eventually owned 10, and he rented 1 acre, so he farmed 11 acres. And he just, he took architecture in college, and so he drew up plans for building. He built a chicken house, and he built the stand, which was about the size of a 3-car garage. And it had doors that, like for a single car, a door that would, heavy wood door that would lift up and go up over the top. And then it had a basement. It was a dirt basement. So at night, we would pull the doors down, take all the vegetables and put them down the basement, and they would keep fresh down there until the next day.
So at that point in time, Richfield was pretty much flat, would you say?
Well,
and then
it's pretty much, yeah, it was a lot of farms. A lot of the farmers, they didn't grow quite as much variety as we did. My dad had put in overhead irrigation in the 1930s, probably. I'm not real sure. So during the drought, you know, he could water everything. And so he cut his own pipe and threaded it, and then he had, like, about every foot or so, he would have like a little spigot so that when the water came on, it would spray out, and it was up high. So, and then he could turn the pipes. He could turn them so that they'd spray that way or spray that way, depending on how much he needed.
And some of the other farms were larger, and they were growing corn and oats.
They were growing,
and
yeah, asparagus. A lot of there was a lot of asparagus. Yeah.
Most of us, or most kids at that age, probably didn't like it.
Yeah.
Now, you were born, you said, in Iota?
Yes.
Which is
Down by Rochester.
South of Rochester, yeah. It's kind of one of those words that are fun to say. When I was little, going down the road, you'd pick up those.
Bedroom community
Iota
today.
was fun, one of them. And so how old were you when you moved to what is now the metropolitan area? Obviously, then it was not.
Well, I was probably about 3 by the time we moved. I remember our first house was down on 27th and Como, southeast.
Oh,
And Dad started with a power company, and it was shortly after. In 1927, he was offered a job out at the dam at Coon Rapids, a good place to raise boys. And I was 7 then when we moved out there in January on a below 0 day. It was cold.
And we didn't have heated vehicles.
Oh, no. We had a touring car at that time with side curtains.
Okay.
That trip was cold.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, the rest of what is now Coon Rapids, pretty much kind of farmland, or had that started?
No, it was farmland. There were farmers there, chicken farms, and there were some truck gardens, but not many. There was quite a truck garden up by the waterworks in the Fridley area, but it was mainly just farms and dairy farms. They produce milk for the Twin City milk producers.
Yeah.
In Coon Rapids.
Well, actually, probably even in Richfield, the farms probably had some cows too.
There were, I don't remember any. They were right across the street from us, which was Bloomington. There was a dairy farm.
Oh,
But
okay.
otherwise, there weren't very many dairy farms in Richfield, mostly truck garden farms.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in central Minnesota, which was dairy, and that was all dairy up there. Okay, so there you are, both of you growing up in the 20s. Obviously, you had to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Herb?
I went to Coon Rapids, the L.O. Jacobs School, and at that time it had 4 rooms, 2 grades in each room. It was one of the first consolidated schools. They had 2 school
and
buses.
4. So
Yeah.
essentially first grade through?
Yes, and I transferred from Horace Mann School in Minneapolis in the middle of the year in first grade. And I remember we had little pegs, and we're supposed to find what 5 plus 2 was. And so I was putting out the 5, and I run out of pegs, and the teacher says, oh no, you count 5 pegs, and then 2 pegs, and then you count them. So I learned early, new system.
And Jeanette, where did you go to school?
I was in District 88, which took in part of South Richfield, and it was on 86th and Cedar, which was in Bloomington. So it was a lot of Bloomington kids, but it wasn't a lot anyway. It was 1st through 8th grade. It was 2 rooms, first through fourth grade in the first room and fifth through eighth grade in the second room. So you had to just be quiet when the other kids were being taught their class. And so it was a nice school, and they had a nice basement, and 2 teachers, and one of the teachers' husbands was the janitor kind of, and took care of the furnace and that kind of thing. And we had a bell, so when you went outside, they rang the bell and you had to come in.
Now, how did you get there? You walked? Or?
We walked. There were 8 company houses there. My dad lived in one of the company houses. And there happened to be 9 boys there among the 8 families. And we walked to school. We were off the main drag. It was about a half mile. In fact, in the wintertime, we skied through the woods to school.
Kind of cross what we would call
cross-country school.
Cross-country
yes.
skiing.
And we were known as the damn kids.
The damn kids.
Yeah.
Which had more than one meaning.
Yes,
obviously.
it did. That was 8th grades.
And Jeanette, how about you?
Well, my folks had a car, they bought a new car in 1936, and that was about the time I started first grade. So they took us to school and picked us up. And they also had an old pickup truck that if they had to, they could use the old pickup truck. And once in a while I walked home, but it was 2 miles. So that was kind of a long ways.
To walk, yeah. And good weather and bad weather, and sometimes you just knew there wouldn't be school because of how much snow fell, and you kind of played it by ear, right?
Well, I was looking at a 3rd grade report card of mine, and I missed over 40 days. But I had been sick in 2nd grade, so I had had polio when I was
going to ask you
in
about
2nd grade, so I missed almost all of 2nd grade for that. And then in 3rd grade, I probably was having, I just seemed like I caught everything that came along. And then we had a long driveway, and, maybe we couldn't get out sometimes.
Did you?
We just bundled up and went when the buses couldn't go in the snow on the side roads like Hanson Road and back in there. The farmers had covered bobsleds, and they picked up the kids and brought them in by the bobsleds. So it was more of them came in. School maybe started a little late, but not much. We never missed school.
And then the bobsled would be pulled by horses?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so there were still horses around there.
The only time we were snowed in was that Armistice Day storm. And they were closed for 3 days then, waiting for the highway to get open. The road from Coon Rapids to the highway was open, but highway wasn't.
Yeah.
That was the only closed time I remember.
So, I suppose, in the country, more rural areas, that was the proverbial one-room schoolhouse, but you guys had a little denser population, so you had the grades either 1 through 4, or in your case, just 2
1 through
grades
8. No, it was 1 through 8
Yeah,
there.
1 through 8. Yeah, and there were
I have
about
an
60.
8th grade diploma.
from that school.
Yes,
Yeah.
from Coon Rapids.
And that was a big thing in those days.
Yes.
I mean, 8th grade meant you had,
Lots of kids didn't
Yeah.
go beyond that.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the 40s a little bit later. Or when did you graduate from high school? Or did you go to high school?
Yes, I graduated in 37 from
37.
Anoka.
Okay.
There was an interurban line there, and we took the interurban into Anoka 6 miles. So we walked to the station. We walked to the school.
This was kind of a train?
Oh, yeah, it's a streetcar. It was just like a Minneapolis streetcar, only it was green and gold for the Halloween colors rather than the yellow of the city cars.
Okay. So, and you remember, did the streetcars come all the way out to Richfield?
No, they went to 54th and Nicollet.
Okay.
So if we wanted to go shopping, a lot of times we'd go downtown. We'd drive to 54th and Nicollet and take the streetcar downtown.
And this is during the 30s?
Yeah,
Pretty
30s
much.
and 40s, yeah.
The streetcar regularly went to the city,
Yeah.
and it was interchangeable. If you got on the Anoka line, you could transfer on the Minneapolis line and go
Yeah.
any place you wanted to.
That really was an
Yeah.
efficient way for people to get
Oh, it
around.
was very good.
And
I learned how to run a streetcar that way. We could throw the switch, put the trolley back on.
and that was how you got to high school then.
Yeah.
So,
And we got out of study hall early if we wanted to take the car back so that those that were taking the bus could get home, see. Those of it that the dam had to walk didn't make any difference.
okay, okay. And Anoka, at that point, was it by grades, or at that point, like it is now, divided by subjects?
Well, it was...
So you had your social studies and
Yes,
math?
yes. It was a
Okay.
standard high school curriculum.
Standard high school
Yeah.
at that point in time.
And I have a diploma from Anoka.
Okay.
There were 78 of us graduated in that class, but Anoka took kids from St. Francis and Dayton and Osseo and Champlain. The others didn't have high schools, so kids from Fridley came to Anoka High School and all.
At that point, was Coombe Rapids a village or a township?
Township,
Township.
yep.
It was a township, and at that point,
That's Richfield was a township.
also. And for the viewers that don't know, Richfield at one point was quite large. It went all the way to Lake,
Lake
Street
Street.
back in the 1800s.
Yeah, there's I've got a
Yeah,
map
you've got
here.
a map.
This is 1874, and it goes all the way over to County Road 18, which is now 169 over here. And 30th Street was Lake Street, and then over to the river and Fort Snelling over here.
And then how far south again?
And then this was, 494
To
with
Bloomington.
78th Street.
Yeah.
It was a full township,
Full township.
yeah,
that was,
36 sections.
Okay.
And it took in, you can see Lake Calhoun and Lake Harriet. They were in Richfield.
You know, we could really would have been quite large if we had kept our boundaries. My goodness, would we have been large. So that was that. And then in, I think, 1927 is when we went down to 62nd and
Yeah.
then 78th, of
Well,
course.
yeah, I think 54th might have been a cutoff, or maybe
At
the,
one point.
yeah, Minnehaha Creek or somewhere in there. I think.
54th was the
Yeah,
border at one time.
54th.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened in
And then
27.
they went to 62nd.
Yeah, and then after that, they went to 62nd. Minneapolis just decided that they wanted that much, and they took it.
And some of the people.
Some of the people wanted to join the
Yeah.
thing too.
Well, let's go back. Now, you said you had polio in the 30s. So polio, I mean, was around for a long time. I
Well,
mean, I
yeah.
think about the early 50s, but it actually,
Yeah, they didn't know what I had at first because I kept coughing, and I was paralyzed in my throat, and so the local doctor that we had came to the house, and he thought I had pneumonia, and he started treating me for pneumonia. Well, then my mother said, you know, this is not right. So she got me into the hospital. My dad's sister was a doctor, so she got me into the hospital, but then she called Dr. Plato. And Dr. Carl Plato he's famous through Southdale Hospital. And he diagnosed what I had and started treating me. And I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And I had one tube down one nostril, went to my lungs, and one went to my stomach. And that's how they kept me going. And then my grandfather gave me a couple of blood transfusions, and we just laid side by side, and his blood went right into me.
interesting. Totally different.
They didn't do the IV and that like they do now, you know.
And that was a very scary time. I mean, even if you got pneumonia, it was scary because there was no such thing as
Yeah.
antibiotics in those.
And I was paralyzed on my right side, so my mother kept massaging me all the time, and that was before Sister Kenny was around. So it was just smart of her that she kept my muscles intact, and so I didn't have any after effects from it.
And I suppose you weren't the only one that had polio.
In 1939, I think a lot of people in Richfield got it, and they, you know, there was just like a lot of scare and that around then.
51, 52 was also on
Yeah,
the same
well,
thing.
actually, in the book, I read that it
Yeah.
was also 47, 48, 49, there was another
Yeah.
scare. These things sort of went around. Health,
No problem.
you had a healthy family.
I'm a damn Yankee. I've had 3 great aunts that lived to be 100, and I remember my great-grandfather at 93.
Oh, wow.
And
That was
I
incredible.
know 3 of the great aunts at 100.
That it was incredible in
And,
those days.
by the way, I live on the old spot where the Sheltering Arms was. The Sheltering Arms was a hospital that took in
Meeting.
the infantile paralysis ones, and Sister Kenny wasn't allowed in the city hospitals. She showed her practice there at Sheltering Arms, and that was discontinued, and the church home built a senior co-op there, and I live on that spot now.
Okay, okay. That's incredible.
I was going with a nurse at St. Barnabas at the time Sister Kenny was here, and she'd go out there to get lessons and so forth. That was in 41, 42.
Okay, so the 30s went on, and your dad continued to, he was quite innovative, always looking for a good way to raise fruits and vegetables more efficiently.
Yeah, and he
Talk
would,
a little bit
well,
about
he
that.
would buy, he'd pick up old pieces of wood. Well, in those days, when he went to the market, he would pick up old crates and that. Everything that was shipped into the grocery stores was in wooden boxes. So he took the wooden boxes apart. In the winter, he would make these flats that would hold 104 little plants. And so he would grow things from seed and transplant them into those flats. And he started out just growing tomato plants and cabbage plants and peppers, and just for himself and then for the local farmers. And then gradually I'm not sure when he built the big greenhouse, but he had a greenhouse that was probably, I'm not sure, like 100 feet long, and it had big benches in it that were made out of redwood, and he had 4 of those big benches, and you could barely reach, you know, as far as you could reach, you could only reach halfway. And so he would plant plants in the benches, and he had pipes up on the sides, up higher, and he'd put the flats in there. And then we had, well, let's see, I have a picture here of the greenhouse and the hotbeds. So he would put the flats out in the hotbeds, and then he would cover up. They had glass that sash, they called it, with a lot of little panes of glass, and he would open that up during the day, and then air could get in there and they wouldn't get too hot. And then at night he'd put those down, and if it got really cold, he'd have straw in the center where they walked, and put the straw up on top of the glass.
For instance.
And then he had a coal furnace for the greenhouse, and so he had to keep the temperature right. And the coal furnace had like an auger, you know, that fed the coal into the furnace, and so if that got stuck at night sometimes, well, he had it rigged up so under the bed he had an alarm. So when the furnace started stopping, the alarm would go off, and he'd have to get up and go down underneath the garage there and get it started again.
So during the 30s, the late 30s, let's say the late 30s, early 40s, was like during the summertime, were these farmer markets open every day?
Depending
Pretty
on
much?
Yeah, we had strawberries in like June.
June.
And so I think he went to the market. I think a lot of times he just got orders. a lot of people would just come out. They just knew we had strawberries. And then eventually we started pick your own strawberries. And the first time he put in an ad, and he thought, well, on Sunday everybody takes the day off, you know, so we went to Grandma's house. Well, the neighbors said, there's people walking all over looking for you. And so that was, that was the beginning of Pick Yourself strawberries, and that went over big.
Where did your family, how did they get the produce, or did you
Well,
grow your own?
We had a big garden down by the river, and during the 30s we hauled water with a bucket over onto the garden from the pond from the river. And we raised corn, tomatoes, cucumbers, watermelons, eggplants. We grew everything.
And then you
Beans.
probably canned a lot.
Yes, we
your
did.
Mother
In
canned.
fact, my brother and I canned 80 quarts of Kentucky Wonder beans one summer, and we canned some corn too on the thing. And that was the way you existed in the 30s. You didn't have money, so that you grew your own. And we had a big garden that way. I remember my dad, they had a horse there on the dam, and Dad, having grown up on the farm, he'd borrow the horse, and I'd lead it for cultivating between the rows on the thing. But we hoe, and it used to be our swimming hole was down beyond there. We could swim in the Mississippi then. And it was always, do some hoeing before you go swimming.
Swimming.
Yeah. We
and,
existed that way. And we bought asparagus from one of the families out along the railroad tracks, and strawberries that way. We picked our own, and Mom used to get chickens that way. We'd get 4 or 5 chickens, you know, and she'd fix them. And these were hens in those days, not these fryers.
Yeah. And eggs, you had chickens?
Yeah, we had chickens sometimes. My dad had the chicken house he made into a workshop in the winter, and we'd have chickens in the spring, and then we would, eat the chickens. Sometimes we had rabbits. We had white rabbits that we grew for a while. And then one part of the chicken house was a bunkhouse, so we had hired men. We'd probably have 2 or 3 hired men, because there was a lot of hoeing and a lot of
During the
work
summer months.
During the summer months, yeah.
Or fall, I should
Yeah,
say, spring,
and then-
summer, and maybe early fall.
And then there would be young boys come out on their bicycles, and especially during the war when we needed help. These young boys would come out from Minneapolis on their bicycles, and they would work during the day. And they were happy to make some money, and they'd bring their lunch, so we didn't have to feed them, and that worked out pretty good.
Yeah, I want to get into that, the war years. Obviously, that was, well, by that time you were employed. Let's back
Yes,
up a little bit. And you started becoming familiar with Richfield.
I dropped out of school in 1941. I'm not the student that my brothers were, and so they said, you should get a job and find out what you want to do. Well, I was in chemistry, and I looked around, and
Oh, you mean from a university?
from the university, yeah, and I'd already graduated from junior college, and
Okay.
so I went to the Minnesota Mining and the gas company and the light company. I knew they did work. Well, the gas company at that time was just going into putting in house heat. And,
So the big lines going.
the big lines were in, so they could add load. They were putting in conversion burners and that, and we had mixed gas, so we had to set all burners to our gas, so everyone needed it. So I was hired to start up these gas burners and became a burner engineer, you might say. That's a fancy term for serviceman in the house heat testing department. And I remember coming out to Richfield to 74th and Colfax in that neighborhood. The gas line was already down in Lindale, and to turn on the furnace on a house out in there, and I thought I was really out in the country.
Well, yeah, describe in 1940-41. What did Richfield look like to you at that point?
It was
what did you see?
along Lindale, and Nicollet had some things. There were filling stations here and there. 66th had some businesses along it. 66th and Lindale was quite an active business place at that time, and really didn't get out there too much. It was new.
Jeanette, what did it look like to you as at that point in time? You would have been about 10, 11 years old. A few houses
Yeah,
you
they're-
shopped there along? Where did
well,
you shop?
we mostly shopped at Schultz's store, which I have a little receipt here, and I think they'll show it on the screen. This was on 78th and 4th Avenue, and it was a
Okay.
mercantile store, so they had groceries on the main floor, and then upstairs, I think they could order things. They had some clothing and shoes and some furniture, I guess. I never went up there very much. I mostly, when I was, I'd be out in the field and the hired men would want a package of cigarettes or something. Well, they would send me to the store. They'd give me the money and then they'd give me an extra nickel. And I would go up to Schultz's and I'd buy candy. Then they had the penny candy, and that was something that I liked to do. And so that, and then they had a meat counter, and so my folks bought their meat there. And everybody had like a running bill kind of, you know, so you didn't pay when you got the food. They just wrote it down, and then at the end of the month or some other time you'd come in and pay.
The same similar thing for you?
Oh yeah, when I was in high school, we didn't drive all the time, so I was in town every day. So my job was to call Mom at noon and find out what she needed for groceries and all. And so Palmer's Grocery was there, and it was all done on these little tabs this way. He had a butcher shop, and I remember he suggested, you know, I got a bargain in lamb. Does your mother take lamb and all? I said, well, I don't know, I'll ask. So she tried some, and it got us, lamb at that time was cheap, you know.
Oh.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I brought the groceries home that way. And you know, that's the way the streetcar in town. Dad would stop at the store on the corner and bring the groceries and the milk and so forth home because they didn't have refrigeration. And that's where all the little streetcar corners were stops with stores on them in Minneapolis, since none of them operate anymore. But you paid the bill, you paid on it every month. Dad was considered rich because he got a paycheck every 2 weeks at the
sure.
power company. Most of the farmers were working on a milk check or what they sold from the farm.
In the fall, too, when the
Well,
harvest
yeah.
came in,
Yeah.
and then that kind of had
So
to
that
carry over.
you went to pay the bill and you paid on it. And then you'd get some cookies or something as extra when you paid on it.
Totally different, you know?
Life was different,
Totally
yes.
different from
Yes.
growing up in 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. You
Yeah.
know, our kids don't have any clue as to what that
But you
was.
see, responsibility there. I had a job that I had to do
Yeah.
and carry it, and it was
Yeah.
expected. That's what
And-
you contributed to the family.
Yeah, and
Everybody
the
did.
kids, I think earlier learned to waste not, do what was expected,
right.
be
Yeah.
there. You
Yeah.
had to can.
Yep.
And
And we had a bread man, a Bambi man.
Yeah, Bambi Man came out to Coon Rapids.
A what?
A Bambi man.
Bambi. Excelsior Baking had trucks that carried
They
the
called
bakery
it the
goods.
Bambi Man.
House to house, they called,
Yeah,
like
they-
the milkman.
Yeah, and we had a milkman, and Watkins came out with
Spices.
like drug type stuff.
Vanilla was
And
well
vanilla,
known.
yeah, things that you could cook with, and then at first they had an ice man. You know, he'd come out with chunks of ice, and we had an ice box. But then we got a refrigerator, and eventually we got a washing machine, which was nice because it was hard washing clothes by hand, especially for the hired men.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was not too much fun.
Well, we reached the 40s, and slowly but surely, even I read in the Richfield, the oldest suburb, we should
this
probably
is-
hold that up.
Yeah, this book is
Just a valuable
Yeah.
treasure trove of tales and stories.
And people can get this over at the Richfield Historical Society, and 69th, is it?
In Lindale. Yep,
69th and Lindale.
This,
And-
by the way, is Lund's parking lot now.
Yeah, this is where
Lund's.
Lund's used to. Yeah,
In the early
there
50s, right?
There was a farm there, and so there's other books and that you can get at, and there's the Bartholomew House there too that people can go through. It's one of the oldest houses in Richfield.
It is the oldest.
Yeah, and my dad knew Keefe, who owned the house after the Bartholomews, and he lived there for a long time, and he farmed. He had, where the practice field is now, that was
was a farm.
his farm.
And so in the 40s, Richfield, though, started adding. They were building at that point, at the one point in the summertime, it was a house a day. So Richfield was beginning to pick up, and that's, you know, evidenced by the extension of the gas lines into Richfield. And then the war came. Obviously, whole lots of changes. Men were drafted, went to the Army. Housing was no longer built during that time.
Gas
You went in-
installations quit, and I was laid off.
And you
Was
went
unemployed. And so I was drafted then in August of 42.
in 42,
Yeah.
you went into the Navy?
No,
Air
I
Force?
went in, I was drafted and assigned out at Las Vegas Army Gunnery School.
Oh, okay.
And I looked for it, I was assigned as a clerk, but I'm not a clerk. And I saw a job I liked and applied for it, but it got turned down many times. Well, I played in a band for about 2 years, and I finally got out of that on a field inspection type thing. And I got into the weather service, which I enjoyed very much.
Oh, interesting.
And then I got moved out of Las Vegas. I had 14 addresses one summer on a top secret job. I was detached to the anti-aircraft. A lot of fun. I learned a lot and things.
Yeah.
I found out it was part of the Manhattan Project, was why it was top secret.
Oh.
Anyway, that was the Army.
That was the Army. And Jeanette, you obviously were at that point middle school kind of age,
Yeah.
junior
Yeah, I
high,
was
what we would call. But at that point, you were
I
seventh,
was-
eighth
yeah,
grade type
Yeah.
thing. Well, what is your recollection?
Well, we had to grow a lot of our own food, and we grew. That's, I think, when we got into rabbits
Because there was shortages.
and chickens, and then to get people to work, my dad would have to go downtown, and there would be like places where these men would kind of hang around that were looking for work, and so he would just say, "I need 2 men for the day," and bring them out, and hopefully they would have some ration cards or little coupons that you could buy food with. Most of the time they didn't, but we had ration stamps, and just and my dad could get gas because he was an essential
Farmer.
farmer.
Yeah.
So he had a tank where he could have gas in to work. He had a tractor and a big truck and a small truck, and this was the little pickup truck that he had. I think they will show that. It's Model A Ford, and it was probably about a 1926 or something like that, or 25. And I learned to drive with that.
It was 26 or 27. It was Model T's in 25 yet.
Oh, yeah, okay. And yeah, I couldn't remember exactly when the Model A's, but it was good for getting around in the field, and he would put half bushels of tomatoes in the bottom part, and then he'd have boards, and he'd have half bushels of tomatoes on the second tier, and sometimes even the third tier, we'd have stuff up there.
And so, and now you were going through, then you went to high school. The war is over, and you went to high school in
Minneapolis. They didn't have one in Richfield. And I could have gone to Bloomington. I had my choice. I could either go to Bloomington for 9th grade, or I went to Ramsey in Minneapolis. And then I went to Washburn, graduated from Washburn.
and all the GIs came home. And they all went, some of them went to school, but a lot of them were looking for houses, and they were marrying, and they were starting families. And Richfield grew like crazy. And you got your job back at the...
Yes, I had seniority, so I came back to the gas company. My union steward gave me his withdrawal card when I was laid off. I says, what's that for? Well, you'll need it, Dodie, you'll need it. Hang on to it. So I came back, and you know, after we came back, they had hired some people in between that were below us in seniority time-wise, but above us in wages. So the first year of negotiations, there were 13 of us veteran returnees that were raised up in the same class wage-wise that the rest were. I got a $140 a month raise that first year.
Oh my goodness.
But then I went to work for the gas company at my same job. I was trained already and accepted that way.
And did you then go back into Richfield doing...
Then, well, yes, it was beginning to expand then, and I looked around. I found a girl down at Hennepin Avenue Church, and we got married, and I saw a house right on the corner of Stevens and 62nd. It looked nice. We needed a house, but it was more than I had money to buy. But the builder says, well, I can build you one with what you've got. So down the street, I wanted a walkout basement. Down the street a block, there was a lot available. So I signed an honest money check on the back of his trunk for $100 for this house. He could build the house for $11,000.
Oh, wow.
11,000.
And so there on 63rd and Stevens. That included the lot and the house. It was 24 by 34 at that time. Modern house, forced air furnace and all.
And
And we moved in.
houses were just springing up all over the place. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, at one point, I think somewhere in my notes here, it was unbelievable. They were building like 100 houses a month or something like that. And did Richfield fill in more from the north side or northeast?
It kind of all grew from the north, from the city out.
Yeah.
From Minneapolis?
Yeah, and it went both ways from 66th Street, I think, also.
Okay, so you had...
We had some throughways that they built from.
Okay. And from what I saw in some of the maps in that book, kind of the southeast, the south, and the west, they were a little later, but
Yeah.
but during the late 40s is when kind of the center and the north part.
Well, southeast had a place called New Fordtown. The
Well, that was
Ford
on the
motor.
other side of Cedar.
Yeah.
Well, on both sides of it.
Okay, originally.
That built up for the Ford plant operators, and that was built up relatively early as plotted out.
Yeah, and no longer exists, at
Nope,
least
it's
on
gone.
the
It's
east side
gone.
of Cedar.
The airport has
Airport
taken
has
all of
now
that
had
line.
Yeah, my dad even rented some land there. It was peat, and he would grow carrots because carrots really grew good. And so he would rent land also down on the river bottoms, just because, you know, he needed
More land.
more land.
But the carrots, like Pete's,
Yeah.
and Pete was underneath the new Fort
Yeah.
Town
Oh, yeah,
area
out
Yeah.
in Coon Rapids, lots of carrots and that stuff grown now, yet.
for the same purpose.
Yeah.
Because of the Pete. Interesting. Rest of Richfield, more sandy soil, clay?
Yeah, pretty
what-
much sandy, but every fall, my dad would start hauling. We had the big truck, and so he would start hauling manure from South St. Paul. And
Which the life, I mean, that
Yeah,
was,
was where
even
the
at that
lives-
point, there
yeah.
was the livestock
yeah, and they had big
yards.
piles of manure, and it was, you know, kind of hot. So he used that in the hotbeds, and then he had a manure spreader, so he would spread that out on the land, and he had I don't know, it was like a disc. They called it a disc.
Round.
But yeah, round discs, like round blades, and there was a whole bunch of them, so he could pull that behind the tractor and, you know, just
Stirred it up, mixed it.
mixed up the soil and mixed that manure into the soil.
And that was Really
farming.
organic farming. Mm-hmm. Did he use
The Germans know what to do with manure. They put it on the field. The French back in Canada don't know what to do with it. It's piled up behind the barn yet.
Yeah, and that was organic farmer. Did your dad use herbicides or pesticides?
Not too much. He had to in the greenhouse because
Yeah.
you had to have pest-free plants, and he sold a lot of things to Bachman's, and so he took care of the wholesale part of it. My mother took care of the retail part, and he would dust the cabbage plants because they would get wormy, but otherwise he didn't use much.
And the herbicide was people pulling the weeds.
Oh, you know,
Right, yeah, we did a lot of hoeing.
you used Paris green on the potatoes and arsenate of lead, today, totally forbidden.
Forbidden, yes. I remember my
And the
mother talking.
cucumbers
Yeah.
had
yeah.
bugs that way.
Yeah, potatoes too, I think, or something.
Well, yeah, but you got those with the two shingles.
Yes, and some of that stuff, like I remember talking to my mother about that, and her parents let her do the spreading of that, but my grandmother, my dad's mother, never let the kids touch that.
No, depended on the family thing. on
Yeah,
things,
because they were worried about the effect on kids.
Well, my dad died from emphysema because of the greenhouse.
Yeah,
But he smoked too.
so
Everybody smoked.
I didn't. Still don't.
I never did.
Never did.
So, in the 40s, in the last half of the 40s, you're pretty young. You're a little older, but you're out having some fun. What did young adults do for fun, entertainment? What was there to do? Obviously, we didn't have TVs.
Well, it was Frenchman's.
Well, roller skating was available, skating rinks, movies,
There
drive-ins.
were movies
Drive-ins were available then.
during the late 40s.
Yes, and roller rinks. I said that, didn't I? On the
Yeah.
thing?
Dancing?
Dancing.
Oh yeah, dance
A
halls.
lot of dancing.
We didn't dance was all, but there was a lot of that. That's where the small bands, Swing and Sway with Sammy Kaye and Lawrence Welk, those bands were established for the rural dance halls. And the weekends where the farm kids all went to dances on that in various farm places.
And
When I was in grade school, the basement of the school, what's called Kimball School, they had dances there with live music, like maybe it was just an accordion or piano or violin or something. And so on Friday nights, the parents and the kids would all go down, and then the mothers would have like a lunch. They'd have a hot dish and cake or something like that for lunch. And it never went real late. I think midnight was as late as it would go.
Nicollet Field, had one of the biggest skating rinks in Richfield, and they had a warming house down there.
Oh, so
and
that-
the kids from all over, even from the apartment buildings there in the city, came to skate there.
That
It
was
was a big, active place, and you don't see that anymore.
well, let's talk about a little bit about the village, roads, utilities. Really, they didn't exist. Everybody had their own water, their
Yeah.
own well,
Own
and when you
sewer.
bought a house, you had to put in a well, and obviously
Yeah.
you had one.
Yeah.
And then septic systems,
Periodically had to get it pumped out, the sand filled in on it.
Yeah.
but your yard wasn't very big.
No.
Well, it was-
It was really close.
So the septic,
It was 38 feet across there.
that's not very much.
Not very. Well,
No, they were bigger than that.
Yeah, we moved the house. Well, my folks built a new house in 1941 on the farm there, right out by the highway. And then, of course, when the highway went through, then in '57, it had to be moved. So we moved the house over about a mile on 73rd and Portland. And so we had to put in a septic tank and a well, but it was only like a year later, and then we could hook up to water.
Yeah, that's a little. I'm talking to 40's yet.
Yeah.
I think the lot was 60 feet wide, 60 by 138, and ours went to the park from the street. But it was a nice big lot, not like the small
The
city
regular
lots.
ones.
Yeah, it was a regular lot there. They were nice lots. This was Town's Edge Edition.
Okay.
Was what I moved
So that was
into.
a bigger lot
that was
than the,
Yeah.
a lot bigger than the others. And so we had, and dirt roads,
Yep.
totally
We
dirt
paid
during
extra
the
to get
40s.
it oiled the first summer because it was so dusty.
So the oil was the only way to keep
Yeah. and
Well, we had Portland, Portland and Cedar and Lindale were the main drags, and I'm not sure what they were, cement or something, I think, because they were,
a little bit better.
yeah, they were better.
Lindale is the Lincoln Highway, you know. It's US 65
Oh, at the
is
time.
Lindale, yes.
Lindale, yeah.
Historically, that's the Lincoln Highway,
Okay, so that was kept.
US
But
Highway.
the ones out in the residential area were all dirt.
Yeah.
And when people, you know, got the house, all they had was dirt around the house, so you had to put on all the landscaping.
I had a big garden in the backyard.
You had
I
to-
couldn't afford grass at that time.
Okay, so you made it into,
Paid off.
yeah, yeah. And, but during the late 40s is when certain groups, and I know one of them was the League of Women Voters, Richfield, really started agitating for
Water.
water and sewer. And I know it passed, I think in 47, but there wasn't enough votes on the bonding part of it. So even though most people wanted it, they couldn't raise the money for it. They couldn't issue bonds. And do you
The
remember
women-
any of that discussion?
Yes, yes, very much so. The women were very active, and they got an awful lot done in Richfield. Richfield had Richfield Liquor, and the money from the liquor stores went into the city things, and they built the first building that was the library there on Nicollet, and they were the activating group that got things done in Richfield. The
It was
women's
the
group,
women.
You bet. The women got the
Interesting.
job done on the thing, and I think you'll find that the news proves that point on it. They were the activists, and some of those are still active. Mrs. Day, for instance, taught school, and she's close to 100, if not 100 already,
is 100.
and she's still active in things. Mrs. The dentist's wife, Ulrich, was
yeah, good.
very active and still is on that. They are the spark plugs and the pushers on things.
Yeah.
And the
And-
History
and
Center is the
Maureen.
same way.
Well, it's continuing. That's being passed down to a new generation of women, I guess. But, even there was another minor polio kind of breakout in the late 40s, and some of the people felt that part of the problem is that the sewer system,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the septic system,
Right.
tank system,
Yeah.
was too close
When
to the well system.
When they built Southdale, they needed a sewer connection to the metropolitan system down on Pig's Eye Island. And Richfield was smart enough with the engineer and all to get together, and they built that line to include Richfield's use on it. And that's how the sewer got built. Well, then, of course, it had to be built into the distribution, the pickup on the thing. But that's how the sewer got built through there, was the money from Southdale in the original engineering, make it big enough to carry Richfield when it's there.
Okay, all the way
And
up
so they
and
made
it's
it that way.
Yeah, and at least through the 40s, Richfield is still a village, even though the population is expanding. And also there was agitation to get a high school, but the old timers versus the new timers. The old timers said no taxes, and
Well.
we had to wait for a high school too, right?
Yes, the biggest thing was that they consolidated the 3 district schools into the consolidated district. Now they had enough to where they could do that. And part of being older is your short-term memory goes bad. The principal of Lincoln's grade school was the main fire plug to put those school systems together.
Okay.
One of the gals that lives at Beckettwood, where I live, was in Richfield schools, and she went to the original grade school. And my son, one of them, went to the school over there on 66th that was a grade school originally, from the original district over there.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know where those kind of townhouses type things are in between where the post office is and 35W, just right on the north side of 66th Street.
Well, that was Wood
really
Lake
a
School. My kids all went to Wood Lake School.
That was Wood Lake
Yes,
School.
yeah. And I went to first aid class out there in 1940, believe it or not. I don't remember how I got connected with that, but I remember going to Wood Lake School. That was the historical school there, and that was just one of the school districts.
Yeah. And, you know, that's, you got married pretty soon
Yeah,
after.
I got married in 49, so I was 19.
Yeah. And at that point, Richfield to you must have changed incredibly. I mean,
Oh,
now
yeah.
where you had all those farms,
Yeah.
there we had all of the houses and everything. Well, we'll have to continue this discussion because I want to, in another program, cover the 50s and 60s, which I'm sure you guys remember very well too, and a lot of changes. But and we didn't talk about transportation, but very rapidly, that airport started getting big on the east side of Richfield. And you probably remember that too in the late
Yes,
40s.
I learned to fly.
Started grabbing up land, and Wold Chamberlain became a very much of an issue. And you were
I learned to fly on my GI Bill by landing on the grass when he had continued the pilot training school that he had started during the war on the thing. And I got a private pilot license through Inc. And we landed on the grass there on the airport. You don't do that anymore.
Nope. And actually, what was then Wold Chamberlain during the 40s, but when it got its beginning, it was a failed racetrack that sort of
Yes.
became a landing area. It kind of converted easily. And you must also remember seeing the little planes come in during the late 30s.
Yeah, it didn't really bother us
Yeah.
one
so-
minute.
And
Yeah.
with
So-
that note, we better end because I only have a minute of time.
Yeah, well, and then there's probably going to be one picture. This is my sister, which looks like a boy, and she's wearing jeans, and we're both barefoot, and we always had puppies,
Puppies
a
around.
lot of dogs around and puppies, and you couldn't buy girls' jeans in those days, but you had to, if you're crawling around weeding and stuff, you had to wear jeans.
And so this has been interesting. We've covered the 30s and 40s, so mostly Richfield, but a little bit, this was happening in the other
north
first-ring
end of the thing,
suburbs of the Twin Cities. And
You could buy a round-trip ticket from Wold Chamberlain to St. Paul for $1.25 in 1941. And I bought one and flew that way.
okay. So thank you very much for being here, both of you, Jeanette Lofstrom and W. Herbert Doty. And this has been kind of fun, someone growing up in the 50s and 60s, to go back a little bit to the days of the 30s and 40s and learn a little bit what it was like and learn what Richfield was during that time, which was a conversion from farming into houses and houses for all the GIs, and we had the beginnings of the baby boom. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
And to my audience, thanks for watching Inside the Issues, sponsored by the League of Women Voters Richfield. Good night.